Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming out. We're glad you all could make it for this big event. I'd like to introduce Will Boothby. He's the Northeast Regional Director. Will.
Hi, everyone. It has been my absolute honor to be a part of this petition drive here in New York. And before we start, I just need to thank the volunteers for their tireless efforts going out day after day after day to do the Herculean task of 45,000 valid signatures in 45 days. As many of you might already know, our goal is almost double that, 90 to 100,000. And the reason for that is after we collect all these signatures, we expect a team of lawyers to be deployed to try to disqualify them, throw them out, and get rid of all of our hard work. But I'm here to say that we are going to be absolutely impervious to any legal challenge based on the rate that we're collecting signatures at this time. So thank you very much. This has been an absolute honor for me. Thank you to all the volunteers, and I'm proud to welcome Mr. Kennedy to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Will Boothby, and thank you to all the volunteers who've given their heart and soul to this effort to get us on the ballot in New York State, something that was considered impossible, but I think we already have enough ballots or signatures to qualify, and we're continuing to collect them until we at least double our requirements. So thank you. Whoops. Okay, we're missing a slide. Bridget, will you just check the slides? I'll make do without this one. It is. Okay. All right, these are just some recent polls that we actually just pulled up this morning, but 74% of Americans are dissatisfied with the way things are going in the United States. In 2013, 85% of young people in our country said that they were very proud to be American. The same poll taken in 2023, so about four and a half months ago, only 18% of Americans say they're proud to be American, of young people. So somehow during the terms of the last two presidents, most of this generation has lost faith in our country and lost hope for their own future. And 74% of Americans say that they're not satisfied with the way things are going in our country, that we're on the wrong path. There are 20 or 30 other polls, we looked at them this morning, that say the same thing with different numbers. President Biden, President Trump acknowledge these polls. They blame each other. President Biden says it's President Trump's fault. President Trump says it's President Biden's fault. The two of them presided over the country when they saw this vast decline in faith in America. And what I would say is that neither President Trump or President Biden are capable of giving us the kind of leadership to change these data points. President, and some of you who have been on the campaign trail with me have heard me say over the past few weeks that President Trump and President Biden are very, very different. Their dispositions, their personalities, the way that they approach life, the way they approach other people, the way they present themselves. And ideologically, they couldn't be more different. But in terms of the issues that actually keep them apart, it's a very, very narrow Overton window. It's abortion, it's guns, it's the border security, it's transgender issues, and a few more. They're all the culture war issues. These are all important issues, but they're not the existential issues that will change this metric. The issue that actually gives people hope in their country, young people hope in our country. That restores our moral authority. That restores the industrial base of our country. And I would say to you that neither President Trump or President Biden has the capacity to change those things. One example is the budget deficit, $34 trillion. Over the past 100 days, President Biden has added $1 trillion to that. Within 5 years, every 50 cents out of every tax dollar that we collect is going to go to servicing the debt. Within 10 years, 100%. And neither President Biden nor President Trump, during the entire course of this campaign, has explained what they're going to do to change that. The issue of the polarization, which is tearing our country apart, this toxic division that's worse than at any time since the American Civil War. President Trump can't change it, and President Biden can't change it because they're part of it. They're feeding it. They're telling us to hate each other. They're telling their followers to be fearful, to be hateful towards the other guy's followers, so they're not going to change it. The winding down of the war machine, the unraveling, President Biden has no inclination or desire to wind it down. For him, it is, and for his entire career, it's been the premier, the lead foreign policy tool. President Trump has promised repeatedly that he will wind it down. But look what happened last week. He colluded with Speaker Johnson and with President Biden to send $61 billion to Ukraine. Oh, it's not going to end. When he was in office, although he promised to wind down the war machine, he brought in John Bolton to run the NSA. He brought in Mike Pompeo to run the State Department and CIA. These are swamp creatures. This is not about draining the swamp. Neither of them has the capacity or the inclination to stop our government from lying to us. My first day in office, I'm going to issue an executive order announcing that any government official or employee who lies to the American public in conjunction with his official duties will immediately lose his job. Oh, if President Trump or President Biden had the inclination to do that, they would have done it when they were in office. The chronic disease epidemic that is now debilitating 60% of our kids, $4.3 trillion a year, 5 times our military budget. Neither of them has made any, both of them presided over it. Neither of them has made any move during all the time they were president to try to address this issue. The destruction of our soils, the addiction to processed foods. There are 1,000 ingredients in our foods that are banned in Europe. And they're feeding this chronic disease epidemic. So these are the issues that are absolutely existential to our country. And Americans are tired of them. And President Trump and President Biden have already shown they have no capacity to change them. And those are the issues, or some of them, that prompted me to announce almost a little over a year ago my run for President of the United States. Now, over the past couple of weeks, as my poll numbers have continued to climb, I've been accused by the press and by President Biden and now President Trump of being a spoiler. So we actually did a poll to test whether that accusation has any basis. And that's the poll that we're going to talk about today. Let's first look at this. This is the dictionary definition of a spoiler. A spoiler is a political candidate who cannot win. Number one, who prevents another candidate from winning by taking away their votes. So those are the two conditions that you need to fulfill if you're going to win the designation as a spoiler. Now, I can't win this, and I'm going to show you why. First, we just did a poll, the typical poll that you see from Quinnipiac, New York Times, CNN, Gallup, has between 1,000 and 3,000 There are 3,600 people that they survey. These are the polls that you all report on. We did a poll, 50 states, 26,000 people, 10 times what anybody else does. This poll typically costs between $200,000 and $500,000. And it gives us a very, very clear picture of who can win this election and who cannot. And I am going to invite my campaign manager, Amaryllis Kennedy, up to explain this poll to you, and then I'm going to come back and make our big announcement.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, hey, Bobby, can I have the clicker? Brilliant. So, as you just heard, there are a few things that set this survey apart from all of the other polls that you're going to see floating out there in the media. One of them is the sample size. Whoops, hold on, go back. So as you can see here, more than 10x most of the other polls that are out there. And of course, the more people who respond, the more accurate the results. So most of these polls have margins of error in the 2%, 3%, sometimes even 4% range. The Zogby Strategies 50-state poll, 26,408 respondents, and the margin of error is 0.6%. The other thing that sets this aside is that rather than being a national poll, this is a 50-state poll. And the distinction there is that there are respondents across every single one of the states with enough coverage in every state to be able to actually allocate the electoral votes as if the election happened today. Now, why does that matter? As you all know, we live in the electoral college system. They call it winner takes all because the candidate who gets the plurality in each vote, with the exception of Maine and Nebraska, get all the electoral votes. That seems obvious to all of us. Everyone knows it in politics, everyone knows it in the media, and yet still point to national polls as an indication of who's going to win. Now, to understand why that is problematic, I think these are reversed on the clicker. Harken back, if you will, to 2016. This is the most recent example you'll all remember of a candidate winning the national electorate popular vote and losing the White House. Imagine that you had the most accurate national poll that has ever been done, a 0.0% margin of error that was taken the day before the 2016 election. It would have told you that Hillary Clinton was going to be the president, and most of them did. And it would have been wrong, and most of them were. Donald Trump ended up winning that election. We all know the rest. First Trump presidency as a result of the Electoral College. And so, maybe that was the reason that the DNC made their fateful decision to back Hillary Clinton instead of Bernie Sanders, who could have actually beaten Trump. But in any event, we are here today to make sure that America doesn't make the same mistake again. And to do that, we needed to be able to actually tally up the electoral votes rather than just do a national head-to-head race. So, with that, I'm going to show some data. I want you guys to know that there is going to be a QR code and a website at the end. It is going to have all of the 50-state data for all of the horse races I'm about to show you, high-resolution graphics, so on, so don't feel like you need to write down numbers. And we'll give you guys a chance to digest it all and then can answer your questions over the next week or two. So first, based on this 26,000 person, 0.6% margin of error poll, if the election were to be held today, and the only two candidates were President Biden and President Trump, this is what CNN's magic wall would look like tomorrow. President Trump wins handily by a 50 electoral vote margin. And congratulations, you have woken up in a world where you have 4 more years of chaos and division and arguing with your neighbors, massive inflationary spending, and, if there's another emergency, maybe another round of shutting down all of America's businesses. So, given that the DNC was shown over and over during the primary, polling that demonstrated that RFK could beat Donald Trump in a general, and still chose to back President Biden, what is their plan for beating Donald Trump in November? Well, maybe they plan to, weaponize the courts and pull a hat trick and force Trump out of the race. It's unlikely, but let's say they did. What would happen? So we ran that scenario too, and here's what the magic wall on CNN would look like in that scenario. Kennedy wins in a landslide by a margin of 96 electoral votes. In fact, Biden only wins 11 states in this scenario, and RFK becomes our next president with the most bipartisan mandate in our lifetimes, drawing votes from across the political spectrum. How healing would that be? Viva Kennedy. And yet, I think given that Donald Trump seems to be pouring all of his donor dollars into his legal defense, and the courts seem to have retained a shred of their apolitical objectivity, I think we can all agree that Trump dropping out is pretty unlikely. So, is there any scenario in which President Trump participates in the election and doesn't win it? Yes, there is exactly one. And that scenario is that President Biden acknowledges that he cannot win, not in a 2-way, not in a 3-way. We ran them both, and makes good on his 2020 pledge not to seek re-election, and allows Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to beat President Trump and save us all 4 years that we dread. Now, I realize that it might seem preposterous to suggest that a candidate should drop out just because they can't win, and by being in the race, they're preventing someone who could win from doing so. I might even agree with you. But the DNC does not think it's preposterous. In fact, the DNC has been demanding that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. drop out of this race in the name of saving democracy from Donald Trump since the moment that he stepped up to offer Americans an alternative to the last 8 years of driving America in the wrong direction. The DNC surrogates have said over and over on every television show that will give them airtime that Bobby Kennedy is a spoiler, and it is time for him to drop out to save our nation from the terror of Donald Trump. So let's take another look at this term spoiler. As you heard earlier, the term spoiler requires 2 components to fulfill. 1, you can't win. 2, by staying in the race, you prevent someone else who can win from doing so. Now, clearly, based on this 26,000 person, 0.6% margin of error data set, by far the most comprehensive data set that we have on this election, all told, this cycle, Kennedy does not fulfill that definition, because whatever you might believe about his chances in a three-way, President Biden cannot win. He can't win in a two-way, and he can't win in a three-way, so nobody can be a spoiler in that scenario because they're not preventing someone from winning who could otherwise. President Biden, however, does fulfill the definition of a spoiler. He cannot win in either scenario, and by being in the race, he prevents the only person who can beat Donald Trump from doing so in November. How do you like them apples? So, the question is, will President Biden heed the dire pleas of the DNC, and as the spoiler responsible for handing Trump the election, bow out and let Bobby beat Trump and save democracy? Or will he hand the country back over to Donald Trump out of stubbornness? Now, maybe he thinks he's got plenty of time, right? It's 6 months out from the election. 6 months is a long time in politics, especially when you have as much money to spend on advertising as the DNC does. But let's just examine that for a minute. President Biden is the sitting president of the United States. He has the biggest bullhorn in the entire world, and he's had it for over 3 years. He's also spent $46 million on advertising already this cycle. $46 million while Americans are staying up at night trying to figure out how to pay for their groceries. We've spent around $2 million, and most of that has been in service of signature collection to even get on the ballot, which President Biden doesn't have to spend anything on. So given that his campaign has outspent ours by more than 20-1, has this boosted his support? Could we see this as an indicator that more spending to come could reverse what we've just seen? Well, let's take a look. So, starting with a website. Here we are, more monthly website visits, but not just that as a metric, all the metrics. We have more visits, we have longer visit duration, we have more pages per visit, we have a lower bounce rate, more page views, more engagements. There are several more pages after this, but I'm sparing you. Not everyone uses websites anymore. Some people rely on social media. Maybe that's where his advertising dollars are really shining. So, Bobby and our campaign outperform Biden's campaign in both engagement and growth on every single platform. So, not showing up on social media either. And you really have to ask yourself in this scenario, okay, so if spending 20-1 against your competition leaves your competition gaining on you in every way, maybe they're just planning to rely on President Biden turning up a charm offensive. He's got 6 months. He can convince voters to change their mind and vote for him in that time, right? The challenge there is that in August of 2023, 77% of Americans believed that President Biden was too old to seek re-election. And now 86% of Americans believe that President Biden is too old to seek re-election. At that rate, by November, it'll be near unanimous. And this isn't a disrespectful thing to say, and it isn't a disrespectful thing to consider. You know, President Biden has given decades of public service to this country. And whether or not you agree with the decisions he made during that time, there is no debating that record of public service. And the natural toll of age comes on us all, you know, don't we know it? But the Kennedy family, more than most, knows that a nuclear exchange is not impossible. Right? False alarms happen. You remember in Hawaii a few years ago, everyone got the text message that said, seek cover, nuclear inbound, say goodbye to your loved ones. And that was a mishap of the alert system, thank God. But in those moments, the President of the United States has 6 minutes, woken up in the middle of the night by Secret Service, being shuffled down the hall, gotten to safety in the most terrible physical, mental, emotional duress that you can possibly imagine. 6 minutes to decide whether or not to return fire. And with all of the beautiful checks and balances of our government, that is the one moment where the lives of my kids and the lives of your kids can be taken by one person in one single act in the blink of an eye. We can lose everything, all of human civilization, dependent on the judgment and the recall and the mental acuity of a single human being. And Americans know that. They know that underneath all of the media jamboree, that is the one most consequential, sacred responsibility of the American presidency. And knowing that, they think it's fair to ask whether the person who has that responsibility should be someone that, with sincere respect, I couldn't leave babysitting my 2-year-old while I went to the movies. It's true, you know it's true. So if that question isn't going away, in fact, is only going to get progressively more urgent, and all the money that they've spent on social media and on websites, and by the way, their digital team is sharp. They have some great people over there. So all those great people, all of this $46 million they've already spent, all of the data that we have around YouTube referrals and social media engagement and website visits, none of that has moved the needle. How is President Biden going to beat President Trump in November? The answer is he can't. And by the DNC's own diktat, that means President Biden needs to do what he said he would do in 2020. He needs to fulfill his promise not to seek re-election, step aside so Bobby Kennedy Jr. can beat Donald Trump, save us from sliding back into another 4 years of chaos, and get our country back on track. So, as promised, here is the website, Kennedy24.com/spoiler. There was a QR code on there, but looks like you're going to have to type it in the old-fashioned way. Sorry, folks. And what you will find there is all of the state-by-state results for each of these horse races, so you can dig in, digest over the next few days, reach out. We can have as many conversations as you want. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the future president of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy.
So Amarillo is going to provide you the QR code with this extraordinarily detailed poll, and it's a treasure trove of information. One of the things that you didn't talk about, and I think you'll find interesting, is that if I remain in the race, and the election was held today, President Trump would win, and President Biden would lose. If I got out of the race and the election were held today, President Trump would win, but he'd win by much more. He'd win by 2 additional states. He would win the state of Maine and the state of Virginia. And so the people who believe that I am spoiling this at this point for President Biden need to look at data. Again, the spoiler definition of a political candidate who cannot win, but who prevents another candidate from winning by taking away votes. This is what Joe Biden said, and President Biden said in 2020, the stakes of this election could not be higher. We only have one chance to beat Donald Trump, and we need a nominee who can get the job done. That would be me. And hear what he pledged in 2019. If you can persuade me there's somebody better who can win, I'm happy to not do it. But I don't see the candidate who can clearly do what has to be done to win. Well, now we can see that. And by the way, our poll is not unique. Every poll that has posed this question, a head-to-head race between President Biden and President Trump and a head-to-head race between me and President Trump, has said the same thing, that I perform much, much better against President Trump than President Biden does. Here's a poll that was done by Zogby. This was in April 2024. This is one of the reasons that I stayed in the race and switched party. Oh, no, sorry, this is this one. This is the May of 2023 poll, and it showed me beating, in a head-to-head race, me beating President Trump by, I think that's, it was 14 points. No, it's 18 points. And me 24 points. And me beating Governor DeSantis by even more. Oh, the other poll, which is recent April 2024 TMZ poll, this is a, this is a significant poll because it's 56,000 people. And it also shows me trouncing President Trump. So anybody who has doubts, any of the media organizations that have doubts about the outcome of our poll, these are the only polls we know about that have asked this question. I would challenge you to do your own poll and ask this question: who does better in a head-to-head race against Donald Trump? Is it me or is it President Biden? And that could be consequential because this is the no spoiler pledge, which we're announcing today. This is a pledge that I offer to take if President Biden also takes it. Both parties agree to co-fund in mid-October a 50-state poll with 30,000 or more likely voters. So this is essentially, effectively, zero margin of error in October of 2024. The survey will test the results of a head-to-head race pitting President Biden against President Trump and a second head-to-head race pitting me against President Trump. Both parties, whoever performs weakest against President Trump in a two-man contest will drop out of the presidential race. So this is a spoiler pledge. And by the way, I'm happy to make this same pledge, although President Trump is not a spoiler because he can actually win. But I'm happy to make this same pledge with President Trump because I can do better against President Biden than President Trump can. Of people who are frightened, who are voting for President Trump because they're frightened of President Biden should be supporting me, and vice versa. And ultimately, I think what we all want in this election is that for Americans not to feel that they have to vote out of fear, that they feel that they can vote out of hope. And that is only going to happen if there's a two-way race between me and President Trump or me and President Biden. The other thing is, if you picture what this country is going to look like in November, if either President Trump or President Biden won, the division is going to continue, the anger, the vitriol, the chaos, the polarization is going to worsen. The only way to end that is through my successful candidacy. I want to thank all of you for coming out here today. God bless you, and thank you very much.